Get out. Now. People like you don't belong in places like this. The words hit like a punch to the gut as Victoria Sterling, head of client relations at Goldman Associates, pointed toward the exit. She looked at the black man in khakis and a polo shirt with unconcealed disgust, completely unaware she was speaking to Marcus Johnson, the hedge fund CEO whose $2.8 billion portfolio was their largest account. Let me take you back to 2:30 p.m. on a sweltering Thursday afternoon in Manhattan's financial district, where assumptions about wealth would cost careers and expose the ugly truth about Wall Street's hidden prejudices. Marcus Johnson had built his empire on the simple principle that money talks louder than prejudice, or so he thought. At 52, he was the founder and CEO of Apex Capital Management, one of the most successful hedge funds in New York. His firm managed $12.8 billion in assets, generated returns that made other fund managers weep with envy, and had never posted a losing year in its 15-year history. But Marcus's success hadn't come from privilege or connections. He had grown up in Newark, New Jersey, the son of a bus driver and a school cafeteria worker. His parents had worked double shifts to keep him in school, and he had paid his way through Wharton with academic scholarships and weekend jobs that left him exhausted but determined. By age 30, Marcus had earned his reputation as one of Wall Street's most brilliant analytical minds. He could spot market trends that others missed, identify undervalued opportunities that generated massive returns, and navigate economic turbulence with a calm precision that impressed even his harshest critics. His secret weapon wasn't just intelligence, it was perspective. While his competitors focused on traditional blue-chip investments and established markets, Marcus understood emerging economies, technology disruptions, and global demographic shifts that most Wall Street veterans dismissed. His contrarian approach had made him billions and earned him a reputation as one of the smartest money managers of his generation. Today's visit to Goldman Associates was supposed to be routine. Marcus had been managing a $2.8 billion portfolio for the firm's ultra-high net worth clients for 8 years. His investment strategies had generated over $800 million in profits for Goldman Associates during that time, making him not just their biggest independent fund manager, but their most profitable client relationship. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was visiting the very firm where he had once been rejected for an entry-level analyst position 25 years earlier. Back then, they had told him his background wasn't the right fit for their culture. Today, his money made their culture possible. But Marcus had never met most of Goldman Associates' staff in person. His business was conducted through phone calls, video conferences, and encrypted trading platforms. His assistant handled most of the administrative coordination, and his legal team managed the contract negotiations. To the vast majority of people working at Goldman Associates, Marcus Johnson was just a name on a very large account. Today was different. Today, he was making an unannounced visit to discuss expanding his portfolio and potentially increasing his investment to $4 billion. It was the kind of business that would make Goldman Associates' quarterly numbers sing. What Marcus didn't expect was that his appearance would matter more than his billions. Goldman Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming steel and glass tower in the heart of Manhattan's financial district. The lobby of the building was a monument to wealth and power. Italian marble floors, hand-carved wooden panels, and abstract art pieces that cost more than most people's houses. Everything was designed to intimidate and impress, to make visitors understand they were in the presence of serious money. The 42nd floor housed the firm's executive offices and client meeting rooms. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Hudson River and the Statue of Liberty. The furniture was custom-made, the artwork was museum quality, and the silence was the expensive kind that only came from soundproofed walls and people speaking in hushed tones about enormous sums of money. Marcus had dressed casually for his Friday afternoon visit. After spending the morning at his own office reviewing quarterly reports, he had changed into khakis and a navy blue polo shirt, the kind of understated luxury that rich people wore when they didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His only jewelry was a simple wedding band and a Rolex his wife had given him for their 20th anniversary. He carried a leather messenger bag that contained his tablet and a few documents. To anyone who understood wealth, Marcus Johnson looked exactly like what he was, a successful businessman who was comfortable enough in his own skin that he didn't need to dress like a caricature of success. His clothes were expensive but understated, his manner was confident but not arrogant, and his presence carried the quiet authority that came from actually having the power that others pretended to possess. But Marcus would soon discover that not everyone at Goldman Associates understood the difference between real wealth and its costume jewelry imitations.
The problems began the moment Marcus walked through Goldman Associates' revolving doors. The security guard at the reception desk looked up from his newspaper and immediately tensed. His hand moved instinctively toward his radio, and his expression shifted from bored indifference to suspicious alertness. "Can I help you?" The question carried an undertone that suggested Marcus was probably lost or looking for something he had no business seeking. "I'm here to see Charles Goldman," Marcus replied calmly. "I have business to discuss with the firm." The security guard's skepticism was obvious. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I'm a client. Marcus Johnson from Apex Capital Management." The guard checked his computer, frowning as he scrolled through the day's appointment schedule. "I don't see your name here, and Mr. Goldman is in meetings all afternoon." "Could you call his office and let him know I'm here?" Marcus asked politely. "I think he'll want to see me." The guard's expression suggested he thought Marcus was delusional. "Sir, Mr. Goldman doesn't take unscheduled meetings, especially not—" He caught himself before finishing the sentence, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. "I understand," Marcus said, maintaining his composure. "Could you at least call his office and mention that Marcus Johnson from Apex Capital is here? I think you'll find that changes things." The guard reluctantly picked up his phone and dialed an extension. "Yeah, it's Mike downstairs. I've got someone here claiming to be a client. Says his name is Marcus Johnson and he wants to see Mr. Goldman. No appointment. Apex something. Yeah, I'll hold." He covered the phone's mouthpiece and looked at Marcus skeptically. "They're checking." After a few moments, the guard's expression changed slightly. "Really? Are you sure?" "Okay, I'll send him up." He hung up the phone and looked at Marcus with new confusion. "They're sending someone down to escort you upstairs. Please have a seat." Marcus settled into one of the leather chairs in the waiting area, noting how the guard continued to watch him suspiciously, as if he expected Marcus to steal something or cause trouble. Other visitors came and went, all of them white, all of them dressed in expensive suits, all of them treated with immediate deference and respect. After 15 minutes, Victoria Sterling emerged from the elevator bank. At 45, she was Goldman Associates' head of client relations, a position she'd held for 8 years. She was responsible for maintaining relationships with the firm's most important clients, ensuring their satisfaction, and identifying opportunities for expanded business. Victoria had built her career on her ability to read people and situations quickly. She could spot a wealthy client from across a room, identify someone's net worth from their watch and shoes, and calibrate her approach to match each person's expectations and preferences. Her instincts had never failed her, until today. Victoria Sterling approached Marcus with the kind of expression usually reserved for unpleasant tasks. She had already made her assessment based on his casual clothes and presence in the lobby without an appointment. In her mind, he was either a disgruntled employee, a salesman trying to waste their time, or someone who had somehow confused Goldman Associates with a different kind of business. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" she asked, her tone suggesting she hoped the answer was no. "Yes, I am," Marcus replied, standing and extending his hand. Victoria ignored the offered handshake. "I'm Victoria Sterling, head of client relations. There seems to be some confusion about your visit today." "No confusion on my end," Marcus said calmly. "I'd like to discuss expanding my portfolio with the firm." Victoria looked him up and down with undisguised disdain. His casual clothes, his messenger bag, his presence in their lobby without an appointment, everything about the situation screamed inappropriate to her trained eye. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice taking on the condescending tone she used with people she considered beneath her station, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Goldman Associates is an exclusive investment firm. We work with ultra-high net worth individuals and institutional clients. Our minimum account size is $50 million. "I understand. That shouldn't be a problem." Victoria's laugh was short and sharp. "Sir, I don't think you understand what $50 million means. That's more money than most people see in their entire lifetime." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. She was talking to him like he was a child who had wandered into an adult conversation. "I think I have a pretty good understanding of money," Marcus said, his voice still controlled but carrying a slight edge. Victoria's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Look, I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing here, but you're wasting everyone's time. This isn't the kind of place where you can just walk in off the street and pretend to be someone you're not." "I'm not pretending to be anyone," Marcus replied firmly. "I'm exactly who I said I am, Marcus Johnson from Apex Capital Management. I manage a portfolio with your firm, and I'd like to expand it." Victoria's expression hardened. She had dealt with delusional people before, individuals who thought they could bluff their way into exclusive circles through sheer audacity. In her experience, the best approach was to be direct and dismissive, to make it clear that she wasn't falling for whatever game they were playing. "Sir," she said, her voice rising slightly, "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but it ends now. Security." The security guard from the lobby immediately began walking towards them. "People like you," she continued, her disgust now completely undisguised, "think you can walk into places like this and somehow belong here. Well, let me make this very clear. You don't."
What happened next unfolded in the kind of slow motion that accompanies truly mortifying moments. Victoria Sterling, head of client relations at one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms, was about to make the biggest mistake of her professional life. "Get out, now. People like you don't belong in places like this." The words echoed through the marble lobby with devastating clarity. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Every person within earshot, clients, employees, visitors, focused their attention on the black man being publicly humiliated by the woman whose job was to make clients feel valued and respected. Marcus felt the familiar burn of discrimination, but this time it was amplified by the setting and the audience. He had been dismissed and insulted many times in his life, but never so publicly, never so cruelly, and never by someone whose salary ultimately depended on his business. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice still controlled despite the fury building in his chest, "I think there's been a serious misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding is you thinking you could walk in here and fool anyone. Security, please escort this person from the building immediately." The security guard approached with obvious reluctance. Something about this situation didn't feel right to him, but Victoria Sterling was his supervisor's boss, and he wasn't paid to question the judgment of senior executives. "Sir," the guard said apologetically, "I am going to have to ask you to leave." Marcus looked around the lobby at the faces staring at him. Some showed embarrassment, others showed curiosity, and a few showed the kind of satisfaction that came from watching someone be put in what they considered their proper place. "Before I leave," Marcus said calmly, "could I just make one phone call?" Victoria rolled her eyes. "You can make all the phone calls you want from the sidewalk. This is private property and you're trespassing." Marcus reached into his messenger bag and pulled out his phone. The security guard tensed slightly, unsure what to expect, but Marcus simply dialed a number and waited for an answer. "Sarah, it's Marcus. I need you to get Charles Goldman on the line immediately. Yes, I'm at his office right now. No, the meeting isn't going well." Sarah Chen, Marcus's executive assistant for over a decade, didn't hesitate. "Marcus, are you all right? You sound tense." "I'm fine, Sarah, but I need Charles on the line right now. Conference in our legal team as well. We may have a situation." Victoria Sterling was watching this unfold with growing unease. The man she was having removed from the building was speaking with the kind of calm authority that suggested he was used to being taken seriously by important people. "Sarah," Marcus continued, making sure his voice carried clearly in the lobby, "I also need you to pull all our account statements for Goldman Associates. Every transaction, every profit statement, every fee payment for the past 8 years. The security guard had stopped approaching. Something was clearly not right about this situation. "And Sarah," Marcus added, "I need you to calculate exactly how much money we've made for Goldman Associates through our portfolio management, include our management fees, our performance bonuses, and the profits they've earned from our strategies." Victoria's face had begun to lose some of its color. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Charles? Yes, I'm in your lobby right now. No, I'm not in a meeting room. Actually, I'm being escorted out of the building by security." "Yes, you heard that correctly." The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the ambient noise of the air conditioning system seemed to have stopped as everyone strained to hear the conversation. "Charles, your head of client relations just told me that people like me don't belong here. She's having me removed from the building." "Victoria Sterling?" "Yes, I don't think she realizes who I am." Victoria Sterling's phone began ringing before Marcus had even finished speaking. The caller ID showed Charles Goldman's direct line, a number that never called unless something was seriously wrong. "Victoria, what the hell is going on down there?" Goldman's voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Sir, I'm handling a security situation," Victoria replied, trying to maintain her composure.
Someone was trying to gain unauthorized access to our offices. Victoria, do you know who Marcus Johnson is? The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. He claims to be some kind of investor, Victoria said weakly. He doesn't claim to be anything. Goldman's voice was rising with each word. He is our largest independent fund manager. He manages $2.8 billion for our clients. He's generated over $800 million in profits for this firm. He is, quite literally, one of the most important clients we have. Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. The phone nearly slipped from her trembling hand. "Sir, I had no idea." "No idea?" Goldman's voice was approaching a roar. "It's your job to know. It's your job to recognize our major clients. It's your job to make them feel welcome and valued." Marcus watched this unfold with the calm satisfaction of someone who'd spent his entire career being underestimated and had learned to use that advantage strategically. "Victoria," Goldman continued, "I want you to personally escort Mr. Johnson to my office immediately. And Victoria, if you've damaged our relationship with Apex Capital Management, you won't have a job by the end of the day." The line went dead. Victoria stared at her phone as if it might offer some escape from the disaster she had created. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I sincerely apologize. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." Marcus looked at her calmly. "Has there? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like everything went exactly as you intended. You saw a black man in casual clothes and decided he didn't belong here. You humiliated me in front of your entire lobby. You had security escort me out like I was some kind of criminal. Sir, if I had known who you were, if you had known I was wealthy, you would have treated me differently. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? You think respect is something that should be earned through bank account balances rather than basic human dignity." The elevator ride to Charles Goldman's office was the longest 90 seconds of Victoria Sterling's professional life. She stood in complete silence next to the man she had just publicly humiliated, knowing that her career was hanging by a thread, and that thread was held by someone she had given every reason to want her fired. Marcus used the time to check his phone. Sarah had already sent him the financial summary he'd requested. Apex Capital Management had generated $847 million in profits for Goldman Associates over 8 years. Their management fees alone represented 12% of the firm's annual revenue. If Marcus pulled his portfolio, Goldman Associates would miss their quarterly targets and potentially face layoffs. "Mr. Johnson," Victoria said quietly, "I want you to know that my behavior was completely unacceptable. There's no excuse for how I treated you." Marcus looked at her reflection in the elevator's polished steel doors. "You're right, there isn't. I hope you'll give me a chance to make this right." "Miss Sterling," Marcus replied, "you had a chance to make it right. That chance was 45 minutes ago when I walked into your lobby and introduced myself politely. You chose to judge me by my appearance instead of listening to my words." The elevator reached the 42nd floor with a soft chime. The doors opened to reveal Charles Goldman himself, waiting in the hallway with an expression of barely controlled panic. Charles Goldman had been CEO of Goldman Associates for 15 years, and he'd never faced a crisis quite like this one. Marcus Johnson wasn't just any client, he was the client, the one whose success had allowed Goldman Associates to weather multiple economic downturns and maintain their reputation as one of Wall Street's most successful firms. "Marcus," Goldman said, extending his hand with the kind of desperate warmth usually reserved for family reunions, "I cannot begin to express how sorry I am about what happened downstairs." Marcus shook his hand but didn't return the smile. "Charles, we need to talk." Of course, of course. Please come into my office. Victoria, I'll speak with you later. Goldman's office was a testament to wealth and power. Original paintings, custom furniture, and windows that offered a commanding view of New York Harbor. Under normal circumstances, it was the kind of space designed to make visitors feel impressed and slightly intimidated. Today, it felt like a courtroom where Goldman was about to be sentenced. "Marcus, please sit down. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, Charles, but I don't think you are." Goldman settled behind his desk with the uncomfortable realization that he was about to have the most important conversation of his professional life with a man his employee had just publicly insulted. "What happened downstairs is completely unacceptable," Goldman began. "Victoria Sterling will be disciplined appropriately, and will implement new training protocols to ensure nothing like this ever happens again." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Charles, this isn't about training protocols. This is about culture. Your head of client relations, the person whose job is to make clients feel valued, took one look at me and decided I didn't belong here. She didn't ask questions, she didn't listen to explanations, and she didn't show even basic courtesy. She just made assumptions based on my appearance and acted on them." "You're absolutely right," Goldman said quickly, "and I want to assure you that her attitudes don't represent this firm's values." "Don't they?" asked Marcus, "because I have to wonder if your senior staff feel comfortable publicly humiliating someone they think is beneath them. What does that say about the culture you've created here?" Goldman shifted uncomfortably. The question hit too close to home. Goldman and Associates had always prided themselves on exclusivity, on catering to a very specific type of client. They had cultivated an atmosphere of wealth and privilege that sometimes crossed the line into arrogance and entitlement. "Marcus, I understand your concerns, and I want to address them. What can we do to make this right?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his options. He could pull his portfolio immediately, costing Goldman and Associates hundreds of millions in revenue and potentially destroying careers. He could demand Victoria Sterling's termination and public apology. He could use his influence to damage the firm's reputation with other high-net-worth clients. But Marcus Johnson hadn't built his success through revenge. He had built it through strategic thinking and long-term planning. "Charles, I'm going to tell you what I want, and then you're going to decide whether our business relationship continues." Marcus Johnson had spent his entire career turning disadvantages into advantages, and this moment was no different. He had the full attention of one of Wall Street's most powerful executives, and he intended to use it constructively. "First," Marcus said, "Victoria Sterling needs to go. Not just from client relations, but from this firm entirely. Someone who can treat potential clients with that level of disrespect and prejudice doesn't belong in any customer-facing role." Goldman nodded immediately. "Agreed. She'll be terminated today." "Second, I want you to conduct a comprehensive review of your hiring and promotion practices. I suspect that the culture that enabled today's incident didn't develop overnight. Of course, we'll bring in outside consultants to audit our entire HR system." "Third," Marcus continued, "I want Goldman and Associates to establish a diversity and inclusion program. Not just as window dressing, but as a real initiative with measurable goals and accountability." Goldman was taking notes on a legal pad. "Absolutely. What else?" "Fourth, I want you to partner with my foundation to create scholarship opportunities for underrepresented students interested in finance careers. Real opportunities, not token gestures." "The Marcus Johnson Foundation?" Goldman asked. "I'd be honored to partner with you on that." Marcus smiled slightly. It was the first positive expression Goldman had seen since the conversation began. "And finally," Marcus said. "I want a commitment that Goldman Associates will actively seek out and support minority-owned investment firms and businesses. Use your influence to create opportunities for people who might otherwise be excluded from this industry." Goldman was writing furiously. "Done. All of it. Marcus, I give you my word that we'll implement every one of these changes." "Good," Marcus said, standing up. "Because if you don't, I'll take my business elsewhere. And Charles, I won't be quiet about why I'm leaving." The threat was delivered calmly, but its implications were clear. Marcus Johnson's reputation in the finance world meant that his public criticism could damage Goldman Associates' ability to attract other high-profile clients. "You have my commitment," Goldman said, also standing. "But Marcus, I hope you'll stay and help us become the kind of firm we should have been all along." Marcus extended his hand. "I'll give you 6 months to show me real progress. If I see meaningful change, we'll expand the portfolio to $4 billion as originally planned. If I don't, I'll find partners who share my values." They shook hands, and Goldman felt like he had just been granted a reprieve from a death sentence. Within 2 hours of Marcus Johnson's departure from Goldman Associates, Victoria Sterling was clearing out her desk. Her termination had been swift and absolute. No severance package, no letter of recommendation, no opportunity to plead her case. Word of the incident spread through the firm's offices like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know what had happened, how Victoria had managed to insult their biggest client, and what it meant for their jobs and bonuses. Charles Goldman called an emergency meeting of all senior staff. The conference room was packed with executives who had built their careers on the assumption that their exclusive world would remain exclusive forever. "Ladies and gentlemen," Goldman began, "we had a serious incident today that could have cost us our largest client and damaged our reputation permanently. One of our senior executives publicly humiliated Marcus Johnson from Apex Capital Management based on assumptions about his appearance and background." The room was completely silent. Everyone knew Marcus Johnson's name, even if they had never met him. His investment strategies were legendary, his returns were the envy of Wall Street, and his fees had funded their bonuses for nearly a decade. "Effective immediately," Goldman continued, "we're implementing comprehensive changes to our corporate culture and business practices. We're bringing in diversity and inclusion consultants, we're auditing our hiring and promotion practices, and we're establishing new protocols for client interactions." Richard Hayes, the managing partner, raised his hand. "Charles, are we sure this is necessary? I mean, it was an unfortunate misunderstanding, but—" "Richard," Goldman interrupted, "it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was discrimination. And if we don't address it immediately and comprehensively, we'll lose Marcus Johnson, we'll lose other clients who share his values, and we'll find ourselves on the wrong side of both history and profitability." The message was clear: change or face consequences. 3 years later, the Goldman Associates Diversity Excellence Fund had become one of the most successful investment vehicles on Wall Street. The fund had grown to $2.8 billion, generated 18% annual returns, and created thousands of jobs in underserved communities. More importantly, it had changed the way Wall Street thought about opportunity and inclusion. Other investment firms began creating similar programs, recognizing that diversity wasn't just morally right, it was profitable. Marcus Johnson's confrontation with Victoria Sterling had rippled outward, creating changes that extended far beyond one firm or one incident. The story had become a case study in business schools, a cautionary tale about the costs of discrimination, and an inspiration for entrepreneurs who had previously felt excluded from elite financial circles. Victoria Sterling, meanwhile, had struggled to find work in finance after her termination from Goldman Associates. The incident had become known throughout the industry, and few firms were willing to risk hiring someone with her reputation. She eventually left New York and found work in a different field, carrying with her a painful understanding of how quickly prejudice could destroy a career. But the real legacy of that August afternoon wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about the power of using influence constructively, about turning moments of discrimination into catalysts for systemic change. Marcus Johnson continued to build his investment empire, but he did so with a deeper understanding of his responsibility to create opportunities for others. The Apex Capital Management Foundation expanded its scholarship programs, funded financial literacy education in underserved communities, and provided seed capital for minority entrepreneurs. Dr. Torres used his success with the Diversity Excellence Fund to launch his own investment firm, focused exclusively on supporting minority-owned businesses in emerging markets. His firm became one of the fastest-growing investment companies in the country, proving that inclusion and profitability could work hand in hand. Epilogue: The lasting change. 10 years after Victoria Sterling's 6 words had nearly destroyed Goldman Associates' most important client relationship, Wall Street looked very different. The finance industry, forced to confront its own prejudices and exclusionary practices, had begun the slow process of becoming more representative of the country it served. The changes weren't perfect, and they weren't complete. Discrimination still existed, both in obvious forms and in subtle systemic barriers. But the conversation had changed, the expectations had evolved, and the cost of prejudice had become too high for most firms to ignore. Marcus Johnson, now in his 60s, served on the boards of multiple investment firms, universities, and charitable organizations. He used his platform to continue advocating for inclusion and opportunity, but he did so with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into lasting institutional change. The words that had started it all, "Get out, now. People like you don't belong in places like this," had become a powerful reminder of how quickly assumptions could destroy relationships, careers, and opportunities. But they had also become proof that sometimes the most destructive moments could catalyze the most constructive changes. Because in the end, this story isn't just about one man's encounter with discrimination. It's about the choice that every person in power faces when confronted with injustice. The choice between using their influence to protect the status quo or to create something better. Marcus Johnson chose transformation over revenge, construction over destruction, and lasting change over temporary satisfaction. That choice, made in a moment of anger and humiliation, had rippled outward to create opportunities for thousands of people who might otherwise have been excluded from the circles of wealth and power. Justice, it turned out, wasn't just about punishing those who did wrong. It was about building systems where doing wrong became impossible, where respect was automatic, opportunity was available to everyone, and success was measured not just by profits, but by the number of people who benefited from those profits. And in the gleaming towers of Wall Street, where portraits of successful investors now included faces of every color and background, that lesson lived on in every young person who walked through the doors knowing they belonged there, not because of their family's connections or their appearance, but because of their talent, their determination, and their dreams. If this story moved you, remember that change happens when people with power choose to use it responsibly. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and never forget that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply insist on being treated with the dignity you deserve. Because every person deserves to be judged by their character and capabilities, not their appearance. Every talented individual deserves opportunity, not assumptions. And every institution has the power to choose between perpetuating prejudice and creating progress. The choice, as always, is ours to make.